Hello, 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 and welcome to Remnant Mentality Ministries. My name is Marie Rogers, and once again, I thank God for another opportunity to come before you today. So, today I want to talk about a couple of what we think maybe simple words. We hear it all the time, but just on how it can affect us, and just by God using us, how it affects other people. So, I want to talk about God's grace, our obedience, and our trust in God. And I'm going to talk about Elijah and the effect that he had on the widow woman, and also just how obedient he was to God in order to show her faith or to give her faith. So I will be coming out of First Kings chapter 17 verses 6. I'm going to actually go through 9 through 16. I'm going to do a truncated version of it. I know it's a lot of verses, but I'll just kind of tell the story. They kind of run together, which is actually pretty good. But just some background on this. So with Elijah, he was a prophet, and he lived in Israel. And also there was a king there, but this king was married to Jezebel, and Jezebel still had the Phoenician ways. And so she had more influence over the people in that city. And so they started following these gods that weren't real gods, but they had her husband, or King Arab, god of storms. And so during that time, Israel, the Jewish, they depended a lot on the seasonal rainstorms, for crops. But what happened is this king did so much damage and so much evil in the eye of the Lord, and he gave him a warning before what could actually happen if he was still disobedient. And the king didn't take it to heart. Nothing happened. And how many of us sometimes, we get into trouble, we do something wrong, and we don't get caught, or nothing happens at that moment. So we're like, whew, we got away with it. Well, this is what the king did. This is something that we have to know. We're not going to get away with it. It's going to be found out. And God knows, he sees, he hears everything. He knows our action. He knows that we're sneaky little devils, and we're going to do something wrong. When we do, we're going to try to hide it and get away from it. And this is what the king did. So one day the prophet meets with him, and he says, hey, listen, didn't God already tell you what could happen if you were disobedient? And the king's like, oh, yeah, they said it was going to happen before. Nothing's happened. So it's all good. Essentially is what he said. So, but Elijah was trying to tell him, listen, this is serious. This is not good being disobedient. You're not even going to just affect you or your family, but also the people of Israel. And he still didn't want to listen. So God, although he wanted to give the people what they want, he didn't want to harm them, but he also had to obey. He wanted to obey the covenant. And that's what he said is a blessing is for those that obey the covenant. And that can be found in Deuteronomy chapter 11. So what he ended up doing is Elijah, and I'm going to read this here. So Elijah tells King Ahab, well, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, the God I serve, there will be no dew or rain during the next few years until I give the word. And guess what? From that day forth, for a couple of years, it was a drought. It stopped. What do you think this did to the folks in Israel? Now, and neither are your Jews that are there, right? You're Jewish that are there. And he had to show them a lesson, all because one king. And so think about that. Sometimes when we're disobedient, even if we think it's just going to be us that get punished, or I can do it, I can handle it, a lot of times it's not. It's going to affect a multitude of different people, our actions or our inaction of things, our obedience. So what the Lord did is he told Prophet Elijah, he says, look, I'm going to spare you. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He told him to go down to a creek, and then right off that feeds Jordan River. And he told him he would get fed off of that, and the ravens will feed him. He'd have water to drink. And that's exactly what ended up happening. The ravens fed him bread and flesh in the morning and in the evening. But after a while, that was also dried up. Now, some of you may think, well, man, why did God send him there? He told him, and then there's a drought there. What else did you want him to do? He did everything he said he was supposed to do. Well, he did. But this is what we have to remember. Sometimes he puts us in a place for a certain time, just for a certain period. And he moves us on to show effect, to have effect on someone else. In this case, this is exactly what happened. So Elijah, from that point, the Lord told him, hey, I want you to go over. There's going to be a widow woman in the city of Zarephath. I hope I didn't say that wrong. Right. And so he goes over to this village of Zarephath. And not only, it's not a Jewish city, right? So it's Gentiles. It's an enemy territory, but Elijah never questioned it. He was obedient. He went on and did everything that the Lord told him. Why? Because he knows that the Lord hasn't failed him. The Lord's not going to send him someplace to set him up. That's what the enemy does. He knew that if God sent him there was a reason for him to be there. He didn't have to question it. He already knew. He had faith in God. He trusted him and he was obedient. So he goes to this village, and when he shows up to this village, he sees the woman out there, and she has these sticks. And so the Bible doesn't say, but we're going to take that the lady was not, well, she wasn't a believer. The very first thing, in fact, when Elijah goes over there and she starts to worry, she was a sinner, right? So she starts to worry that maybe he's come to do some harm to her or her child. But Elijah tells her, no, be careful. Don't worry. That's not it. And this is what I'm going to read. So again, this is out of 1 King chapter 17. It's going to be verse 9. It's out of the NLT. So he gets to the village. He sees the lady. As he arrived at the gates of the village, he saw a widow gathering sticks, and he asked, would you please bring me a little water in a cup and also a little bit of bread? And the very first thing she says is, I swear by the Lord, your God, that I don't have a single piece of bread in the house, and I have only a handful of flour in the jar and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jug. I was gathering a few sticks to cook this last meal, and then my son and I will die. So here's a lady who's preparing to die. She wants to make one good meal with whatever resources she has left. And that was it for her and her son. Again, remember, she was under the impression that when he came there, that he was already going to cause her harm or punish her based off of the sins she'd done in the past. Now, remember, that's not what he's going to do. That's not what he's there for. God's not going to hold things over us. He's not going to send people to harm us in that manner for that reason. But again, instead of her questioning him, she knew he was a Jew, and she went ahead and she did exactly what he said, because he tells her, listen, I understand that. And he says, don't be afraid. Go ahead and do just what you said, but make a little bread for me first. Then use what's left to prepare a meal for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord says, the God of Israel says, there will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when its Lord sends the rain and crops will grow again. So look, he says that this is coming from the Lord. It's not coming from him. So he's trying to calm her down also and tell her, don't worry. I'm not just coming up with this stuff. This is what the Lord is telling me to pass on to you. And she does it. And then when she does it, guess what? The Elijah, her and her son feast for days. It continues to stay full. Right? God is a provider. God is going to provide for us. And not only this, his grace. This was a sinner, and she was a Gentile and a woman and a widow. I mean, she had a lot of strikes in those days, which were considered strikes that were against her. But God didn't see that. He still showed her grace. He still provided for her. And what do you think after he provided for her? What do you think for her? She's thinking, I have faith. I believe. And that's why sometimes for us, it's important that we make sure God can use any of us. We have to make sure that we don't discount people. We don't throw them to the side. Her people may have just said, oh, you're a widower. Hey, you're a woman. You have no money. You have no resources. You're not worth anything. Go off on your own. God doesn't do that. He doesn't want to leave anybody by the side. He wants to give it out there. He wants to let you know. He lets us know that he's there for us. We just have to grab a hold. That's all we have to do, grab hold and just believe and be obedient to him. And we understand, just like we said prior to this in that story, what happened is the people that were disobedient, even if it was just that one king, they were disobedient. You see the wrath that it caused. You see what happened. And he had to show the people of Israel, hey, he's the real God. This is who you follow. Not all the other little gods that are out there. Not all the other things that we may idolize. Those things don't do anything for you. Doesn't matter what anyone says. Those are coincidences when things happen. But for him, he can turn it off and turn it on. He has to let them know. And sometimes we get reeled in also by him, because we think that we're doing everything on our own, and we have to be reminded that it's God that's doing everything. He's pulling the strings. He's orchestrating everything in our lives for us. Now, here's some takeaways from that story. Again, like I said, his grace was given to a Gentile, the widow. She was not an Israelite, but God still chose her. He chose her to take care of Elijah, a prophet. That was unheard of at that time. The woman, his grace is so great. He comes to the sinners. He doesn't say, oh, you know what? You sin. You didn't ask for forgiveness. So you know what? I'm not going to expel my grace on you. He knows that we're going to make mistakes. He knows that we're not perfect. He keeps his grace. He extends his grace to us, hoping that we eventually come to him and we ask for forgiveness and we be obedient to his word and we want to follow him. And those things help build up our trust. When we see things like for the widow, when she saw that happen, because all she saw was just that little bit that she had just to hold on, just to give something to her son. And then just listening to Elijah, by the Lord, they have plentiful now for days. Never have to worry about it. Just keep doing what the Lord tells you to do. God chose her before she even knew about it. Any one of us can be chosen, right? Any one of us can be chosen. It's not to say you got to be on your best behavior now because I don't know. Because God, like I said, God knows that we're imperfect. We're like the perfect imperfect, right? We're going to make some mistakes. A lot of them, some of us are going to make them over and over again. But any of us can be chosen. Again, he chose a Gentile to care for a Jew, someone Jewish. He an Israelite. Wasn't thought of. And because of Elijah's obedience, helping this lady, and her trust and doing what Elijah said, look at how they profited from it. Look at they were fruitful in their lives after. And what came out of that is faith. Out of everything that happened. Look, Elijah never made a move until the Lord told him. He stayed put, even if he didn't see, if he saw the end at that time and start to wonder why. He never moved until the Lord told him to. And that's what we have to do. We have to be obedient. We have to wait. And sometimes it's going to take a lot longer than we know. Sometimes it's going to take a lot longer than we expect. Sometimes we're going to run out of patience, but we got to hold on because everything comes in due timing. Remember, God extends his grace to us. We're obedient. It builds trust and it equals faith. And that's what we want. That's what we have to do in order to move forward. So I hope that this lesson encouraged you, especially if you're at a time in your life right now when you can't see ends meet, when you don't know what's going to happen, when you're starting to sway a little bit, when you're starting to backslide a little and say, God, I know you told me, but God, I messed up and I don't think I can come back. God, I did too many things wrong. And that's not the case. He wants us to come to him. He wants to console us. It's just like your parents. They want to console their crying child. But if they keep walking away from it, it's only so much they can do. But God's grace is there for us. He extends that to us. Doesn't matter. Jew or Gentile, doesn't matter. A sinner or not, doesn't matter. Male or woman, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the color of your skin. So if it's been encouraging to you, thank you very much for listening. And if you think it can encourage someone else, just remember to look at the story. So really, it's a wonderfully written story. When you look at it, it's a lot of good takeaways from it. We just hit on 3, but there's a lot of takeaways that you can get just from this story itself. Again, my name is Marie Rogers with Remnant Mentality Ministries. I ask that you go on and like, comment, share, definitely subscribe on YouTube. Let someone else subscribe, talk to them about it so that they can comment as well. We're on all social media platforms to include YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And again, until next time, have a beautiful, blessed day. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next week.